feeling in the back of your mind, or maybe a weight on your shoulders that you're not really sure if you're making any money, and it's quite stressful. Just as is having bills, your invoices not paid is very stressful too. Which
I feel a segue coming up.
which is why I created these hacks, because
Kathi, welcome back to the Sideshed podcast.
Hey Matt, great to be here. Hi everybody out there.
We just figured out the last time you were on this show was February.
Months ago. I cannot believe how fast this year has just flown by.
Oh man, it's insane. And you're tuning in from Perth, from Tradie Books. For you listeners and viewers out there, tradiebooks.au is the website. We're here today in the lead up to that festive time of year to talk about the five simple hacks for you to get paid before Christmas.
Yes, to get some money in the bank, hey guys.
Which I'm learning more and more as the kids gets older is important.
Especially at Christmas.
Especially at Christmas.
Yeah. And Christmas is usually a busy time of year too. So if you can simplify some of your admin and accounting processes, all the better.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's probably fair to say that that's good practice regardless.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely is.
I've actually got a meeting with my bookkeeper next week to discuss how to simplify mine, because there are a few things in there I didn't really like the look of. So, yeah, I guess it's good to refresh, go back to those and refresh it every now and then.
Well, I would even say that it's really important to look at those numbers very regularly. You know, if you don't look at your numbers, you don't really know what your business is doing.
I did that for years, just stuck my head in the sand, and purely because I was terrified of knowing the truth. So I was like the ostrich, you know.
Mm.
And second of all, because I didn't understand it anyway. And I had a string of dreadful accountants that literally they may as well have been speaking Mandarin to me. Like, I just didn't understand anything they were talking about ever. And they were almost patronizing in the relishing in the fact that I didn't understand any of it, which led to ATO debt and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, the point is, you know, if that is you guys out there, then the only thing that changed was me taking ownership of it and wanting to learn it.
Yeah, and I think having a person who can explain things in layman's terms is super helpful too, because some accountants do tend to speak their own language a bit like lawyers do, and it can be hard to...
Well, truthfully, a bit like plumbers do. Like, you get in any vertical. Like, we work the amount of times when we have clients fill in like web onboarding forms and this kind of stuff for new websites, and I'm like, guys, you can't write this website for what you want to hear. Like, this is got to be written so that people actually. Because I mean, we now just do all the copywriting, right? Because like, until we did that point, we would just get jargon galore full of stuff that no one understands.
Yeah, yeah, it's like that probably in most industries. Hey, and
totally.
And, you know, when it's something like your financials where people don't really want to know, you know, they don't really want to look at reports and sift through numbers. So we try and make it as simple as we can for our clients. We get on a video call and we break it all down. And after a while, they understand how to read their own financial statements, which I think is very healthy. And it gives you a lot more control. You know, when you don't really know what's happening, you have this sort of feeling in the back of your mind, or maybe a weight on your shoulders that you're not really sure if you're making any money, and it's quite stressful. Just as is having bills, your invoices not paid is very stressful too. Which
I feel a segue coming up.
Which is why I created these hacks, because they're super straightforward, but not everybody knows about them. And you can't assume that everybody knows all the tips, right? Even if they are super simple.
Sure.
So shall we jump in and talk about those? Okay, so the first one, of course, is to have a policy around getting deposits. I've heard from a lot of tradies that they don't actually even get a deposit, and some of them are just getting paid on completion. And that's a big shell out if you've got to buy materials, if you've got to cover wages, depending on how long the job is, of course. The longer it is, the harder that can be. And so I always say if you can get a deposit, at least enough to cover your materials, if nothing else, and make sure that you're paid. If it's a longer job, longer than a couple of weeks, make sure that you have sort of like progress payments. Now, for anybody who is in the building industry, that may seem very obvious, but there's a lot of guys out there that are starting up too and don't really know this
No, absolutely.
stuff. So I think it's a good point.
And you know what, Kathy? Like, what we work with loads of businesses in the project space. So lots of like bathroom renovations, kitchen remodeling, roofing, solar companies, and this is one thing that we try to help a lot of them implement is the ultimate qualifier, like take a deposit, because up until someone pulls their wallet out, really, like they're still just a lead.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like we see it fall over all the time, with contracts that just, disappear because of there's no down payment or whatever it is. And so it's a really big thing for you guys out there. There's no, like, the biggest thing that we try to help our clients do is get paid before they do any work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we've got builders that do like renovation clients and stuff that might spend like quite literally 2 weeks preparing a project analysis. I mean, and for nothing, like just to hand it over to the not yet client, who then just gives it to the next builder and says, "Beat this by 10%, the job's yours," kind of thing. Like it's a joke.
Yeah, yeah, and actually that leads into one of my next tips is to charge like a quote fee, because if you win the job, you can take that fee back off their bill.
Correct.
But it will cover your time and going out and spending that time looking at the job. And then if it's something more complicated like what you're talking about, that's a lot of time and effort to put into a quote or an estimate for no return. So depending on your trade and the industry, you kind of got to sort of figure out how you're going to do it, but you don't want to be spending that time for free, because that's a loss.
So I'll give you the spin that we put on this, and for you guys out there that aren't doing this, take note because it's super useful. So when we were dealing with with our builder clients, the sales process for them essentially is once they get this is what always happens, by the way, 100% of the time, Kathy, when businesses come to us, they want more leads. When we generate more leads, the very next thing that falls over is the bottlenecks in the sales process. Like 100% of the time, it doesn't matter how big the business is, if you're doing 40K a month through to $1 million a month, is always something in the sales process that needs evolution. And so for the builders, when they're getting these leads, before they go and put any work into, drawings and all that kind of stuff, we get them charging a scope, like for a scoping session or a scoping fee, which could be anywhere from, I think the lowest end that's from our bathroom reno clients might be $350 right up to some of our, bigger home builders. It's like 12 grand. But the point is, like, get them charge for your time.
Yeah.
And the mindset behind that is, well, if I'm going to prepare this for you properly, then I need to spend the time to do it, and I'm not going to be doing that for nothing, because it takes a lot of work, and it does take a lot of work if you're going to do it properly. And on the flip side of that, if they don't do it, guess what happens? Variations, like all this shit they missed because they didn't put the time in that it deserved in the early stages.
Absolutely. And I'd also say that it speaks to the customer's mindset. If they're willing to pay for a scope.
Correct. I mean, if they're not going to spend 12 grand to get something scoped out properly, they're sure as hell not going to spend $500,000 to get a property built.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And
so it's the ultimate disqualifier.
Yeah.
I call it. Like, if they're not going to pull their wallet out to get this done properly, then see ya.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads to the variations tip, because I've got a client right now, actually. He's just lost $80,000 in variation invoices because the builder's saying he didn't provide the right evidence to make the claim. He got verbal approval on site.
Oh, of course he did.
Yeah. And there's nothing in writing. And so now they've just gone, nah. And so he's got to write off $80,000 in bad debt.
Yeah. Been there.
Yeah. So that can actually break somebody. That can break a business.
It broke me, actually. Mine was $50K. And after that, I was like, no, chucking it in.
Yeah. So really, really important that if there's any variations or anything outside your original agreement, to get it in writing, and even an email trail with the right person, you know, your project manager, whoever the person is that can approve the work, you need to have that in writing. And if they, in your contract, if they require evidence for the variations, make sure that you take note of what that evidence is and be careful to collect it. We've put a whole giant process in place now with this client to make sure that if it happens again, we won't get stuck. So it'll be in your contract what you've got to do for variations, and often it's super fiddly. It's like photos, and you've got to have proof of every little thing and who asked you to do it and when it was done. And so it can be really, really complicated, but it's super important or you won't get paid. Like, there are builders out there, they don't give a shit about you. They only care that their stuff's done and that they make a profit.
Yeah, and they're not builders anyway. They're all lawyers and contract this and contract that.
Yeah.
But you say it's complicated. Truthfully, there's so many like great tools now for these things that make it quite simple. Even most of the project management tools, out there have some built-in components to them which enable you to document variations.
Well, that's a good point, because I have found that a lot of my tradies are very adverse to technology.
Not the ones that are listening to this podcast.
Well, I hope not. But even sometimes getting receipts can be difficult, let alone getting them to use a project management app. But you're right. I think that we need to use technology to our advantage. And if there's an app out there that will make your life easier, put the bit of time in to learn it, because it'll pay dividends, especially in a situation like this where it helps you get paid.
100%. And if that is you guys, like, I recommend you go reach out to our friends over at Tradies, because they do a really good job of that. Like, they'll help you deploy the tech you need for that sort of stuff. It's awesome. But I mean, look, there's no excuse for it. Like, you've got to do it. And yes, builders will always give you the runaround, because at the end of the day, if they don't have to sign or approve something, then they can not pay it.
Yeah.
Very I'm not trying to paint unethical with a tar brush here, of course, but like it happens. It really does.
Yeah.
Truthfully, it's not so much the smaller guys. It's normally the bigger building companies they're not builders. They're lawyers, and they're
I'd agree with that. Yes.
Contract administrators, and they're just like there's not a builder on site kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. This was one of the big builders that has done this to us. So
exactly.
I'd agree with that comment.
And sadly, I think it's because of also there's incentives in place for people in charge of these contract administrations to, if they come under budget, then they get a commission or they get some sort of incentive from it. So their incentive is actually to rip you off in a lot of times.
That's so shifty, isn't it?
It's super shifty.
Yeah. So be careful who you work for. Something I learned very early on in running a business, even in my industry, was that you don't always want every client.
No, 100%. And I think like that is such an empowering, and this is a conversation also we have with clients all the time, because when they typically come to us, their main problem is they're running off maybe word of mouth. So they have work and they have leads, but they don't have consistent leads. And what's empowering for them is when they actually start getting regular leads, it enables them to start being more picky and choosy with who they want to work with, because you can get a referral from someone and you take that job because you have to and you've got nothing in the pipeline. But when you've got a whole bunch of leads coming in, you don't have to take it.
Yes, you can pick your most profitable jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why we're here. We're here to make profit. Otherwise, you'd have a job, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What do we get up to?
I
I
haven't
we jumped the gun
really
there
gone in order, but that's okay. So I was going to say, those big builders, here's a tip for dealing with the big builders, because I've used this and I've saved a couple of people from bankruptcy using this tip. When you are dealing with a big company, contact their accounts department and find out who processes your invoices. Get their name and make nice. Be nice. Make friends. Hello. Tell them who you are. Introduce yourself. Find out. Some of them do, some of them don't. But some of them will have a special policy for small business to get paid faster. Now, I found this in the mining industry, that the big mining companies did this. So I don't know if the big builders do it or not, but it's worth asking the question. Find out the dates they do their payment runs. Typically, a big business will do 2 payment runs a month. And then that means that your invoices need to be in by a certain date to be in that pay run. So if you can get those dates and schedule your invoicing so that you've got it in on time, according to how they run their accounts payable, then you're going to get paid more regularly because you're adhering to their system. So basically, you're hacking their system to make sure that you can use it to your advantage.
It's going to be a lot harder to do when AI takes over and you're dealing with robots.
Anyway. Well, that remains to be seen how that's going to go, isn't it? That's a whole new conversation, AI.
I did do an interesting, 2 interesting podcasts not so long ago, actually. Episode 369 with Kean Brennan, Mastering the Art of Contract Negotiation, and then in episode 379 with Brian Will, I did one which was called How to Negotiate Like a Pro. But essentially what I learned in those episodes was that you do actually have negotiating opportunities, power, and more importantly, an obligation at the point of at the contract level, where you are almost expected to be negotiating on the contracts that you're given, and a lot of people don't do it. A lot of people just don't do it. They just get the contract and sign it without actually looking into things that can be negotiated. And some of those things can be payment terms. They can be LDs. They could be a lot of things like that, So there's things that you do have a lot of power there, which a lot of people sort of overlook.
Yeah, well, if no one has taught you that, then how are you to know, I guess, especially, again, if you're new. And that's another thing. Make sure that you've got your purchase orders quoted on your invoices. That's a super easy one to make sure you do, because they'll reject it if they don't have a purchase order on there. It's part of you've got to understand that big businesses aren't like small businesses. They have these systems and procedures in place, and you need to follow them, or things just don't happen. You'll get stuck in their system. So it's smart to find out what that system is and make sure that you're, the dates that you need to adhere to so that you can get paid.
Well, that's a good tip anyway. That wasn't in there, was it? Buttering up the accounts.
I said make nice. Make nice. Introduce yourself and ask if they have a policy in place for small business. Yeah. And I'd also say send statements every week. This is something that most people forget to do. So if you don't...
like financial statements?
No. A statement to your customer saying what they owe you.
Yeah.
Your accounts receivable statements. So often you'll have more than one invoice in with somebody, especially if you're getting progress payments made, and you need to send statements to keep them on their toes. And part of their process will be checking those statements and making sure their system reflects what is on the statement. And so if there's a discrepancy or something missing or something got stuck in their system, that will prompt them to reach out about it, getting that statement.
Makes sense.
Yeah. It's a real simple one that just people don't really remember to do.
And again, like a lot of technology will automate that.
Yeah, that some software does automate it. I guess the big thing is I see with the small to medium sized guys is they don't always have someone like me in place. Sometimes it's the wife, sometimes they're trying to do it themselves, or sometimes they just use a tax accountant and not someone in the middle. And so not all of these things get done regularly. Yep. And so there's also the option, and I wouldn't say this for big builders, but for smaller residential type jobs, you could offer some sort of incentive to get paid up front or to get paid cash. I think that the cash economy is still going strong with tradies, and I think it's something that we should encourage because...
You're not alluding to not declaring though, are you?
Oh, no, not at all. But cash is king. There's no bank fees. There's you still record it as if it went into your bank. But, if you can avoid all the fees that go with electronic processing, then maybe you can offer a discount to get paid faster. And is it not better to have the money in your pocket than it sitting in your system and you're not going to get paid for a month?
Sure.
So sometimes it can be worth taking the discount or to get that money faster. And of course, that probably depends on your cash flow situation as well. But when you're shelling out for wages, cash flow can be a tricky thing to manage for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would agree with discounting, to be honest, on the getting paid up front.
I've got a bit of a hack for that because I recommend that we
wonder if we have the same hack.
Build in an admin fee into your quoting. My concreter in South Australia, I've got him adding $500 into his bigger jobs for an admin fee. That admin fee can then be used as the discount. So you're not losing anything off your actual job. You're just taking back from something you've built in. What I have, I guess what I've learned over all the years of doing this is that where we lose money is our time. It's like a time leakage because you underestimate how much time you're going to spend on a job. And if you think about there's the job itself being on the tools, supervising your team or actually carrying out the job. But then there's all the other stuff. You've got to order materials, you've got to do your admin.
Got to look at Instagram.
Post your photos on your website. I don't know. But there's a lot of time outside the actual job that is used that people kind of forget about. And then there's the time that you need to chase the money as well, right? And if you've got a bad payer, that can be quite a substantial amount of time. So I think that and some sort of admin fee, build that into your quote is a good idea because that covers a few hours of those extra time that you're going to spend. And you don't have to itemize it. You can just lump it in there. But it also gives you a little bit to play with if you want to do a discount or you want to say, if you want to pay me cash, mate, I'll knock $500 off.
I mean, there's an insane amount of admin that does go into chasing up bills and even with our business, we have it's a seemingly more automated system, but still chasing bills and stuff takes a lot of work. There's so many moving hands involved. It's crazy.
So is that not worth a discount to get the money now?
Well, we don't discount for it, but there's an incentive. Our price is our price, and if they don't want to do it that way, then they pay more.
Okay, so you've gone the other way. Instead of discounting, you've gone
absolutely.
This is the price if you do this payment method, but if you want to do this, it's going to cost you. Yeah, that's fair. I think that's a similar thing.
Every instance, it still doesn't cover itself, to be honest, aggregate, but it's like an incentive to follow the actual system.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I mean, that is the biggest thing, I think, is you just don't realize how much time is used up in these processes that are outside the jobs themselves. And I often find too people are grossly underestimating the amount of time even on the job. So now you probably don't have that so much because you've trained your clients to do that properly. But again, for the newbies that are not as experienced, then it's very easy to underestimate not only the time on the job, but then the time that it takes to do everything around that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, hourly rate calculators and stuff that you can get. Actually, I think truthfully, there's a bunch on the SiteShed website if you guys want to go check it out in the resources page. But like calculators you can use to figure out what your true costs are, because it all comes down to, well, not always, but if you're in the reactive business, like the reactive sort of side of trade businesses, plumbers, whatever it is, you're typically, you can only charge for billable hours. And so if you've got a technician who's working 8 hours a day and he's only billing for 5, you've got to make up for that.
Yeah. Oh, I had a thought and I've lost it. But yes, you're quite right. So time overrun is a big one. And, that's what I was going to say. With our accounting processes, one of the things we do with our clients is we put all of the job cost stuff, the stuff that's directly related to the job, in a section in your profit and loss called cost of sales. And so that means that when you're looking at your profit and loss statement, you can immediately see the expenses directly related to the jobs, how much they're costing you, and then what's left for your overheads.
So you can work out the net profit based on that number straight up.
Right. Well, gross profit's that part, and then the net profit's the end after your overheads. So to quickly explain the profit and loss for your newbies, it is basically your income less your expenses. But accounting, here's some accounting jargon, a cost of goods sold or cost of sales is a special expense category that we use at the top of the profit and loss. So you've got your income and then you've got all the expenses that you have to spend in order to do the job. So this is things like materials, equipment hire, rubbish removal, and then direct wages for the people working on the actual job. You cannot do the job without those things. So they're your cost of sales. And so if you've got your revenue from your job and then you know what your direct expenses for that job are, you know immediately if you're making a profit on that job. But then you've got to account for the overheads, and then overheads are things that we have to have in order to run a business, but not necessarily pertaining to that particular job. Things like your phones, your vehicles, your rent, your electricity, all those sort of things that we call them overheads. And so when you're costing out, it's important not only to include the direct job costs, but to also have an amount that covers the overheads. And so this is where cost accounting is super important. And I don't know how much of this you do with your clients, but that's...
Well, I'm not a coach, so I wouldn't do any of this.
Right.
It's useful, so...
Yeah, so that's my specialty. I'm actually a cost accountant. And so that's why I work at this side with small business on a day-to-day basis, right up until tax time, and then we hand over to a tax person because Kathi hates tax.
It's all so exciting, Kathi.
I can't stand tax and I don't want a bar of it. But we get clients right to the point where the tax accountant can do their part using really clean figures so that they cost you less because we've done all that work for you. But the most important thing is that you're making a profit in each and every job. And how do you know that unless you do this exercise with not only the direct costs, but charging back overheads too, to make sure that you're covering those, because, you know, like we said, the time overrun's a huge one, but then you've got all these other overheads as well. And you won't make a profit unless you take that into account.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best things for me was when we embraced the profit first system into the business, which gave us just transparency over all these different, you know, departments, if you want, or financial departments within the business. Like as a financial model, I just found that such a simple way to cut through the something that is typically quite complex and complicated, and it's just sort of simplified it quite a lot for a stupid plumber like me.
Well, I wouldn't say stupid, because, you know, you've got all that plumbing jargon down.
Don't patronise me, Kathy. I know what you're doing.
So that's it. There are hacks. Policy to get deposits and watch your payment terms. Make sure when you're dealing with a big company to find out what their processes are so you can hack their system. Either offer your discount or do what Matt does and make it more expensive if they want longer payment terms. Build in that admin fee. I really, really highly suggest that everyone does that. Send your weekly statements to your customers to make sure you're reminding them they owe you money. And watch variations. Make sure you get everything in writing. And I would add too, there's a little mindset sort of tip too. Business owners are not banks. We're not required to give anybody credit. If I do something for you, I should be paid for that right now as I've done it, right? We're not required to give anybody credit. So giving them payment terms is doing them a favor. Do not be afraid to chase money that you are owed. I see this a lot, that people are shy about asking for their money, but they owe it to you. You spent resources to do that job. And so you're fully within your rights to collect that money. And so never feel unsure about trying to collect money.
Yeah, and these are definitely one of the things that I learned back in those podcasts, that you can negotiate some of these payment terms where it's like, 90 days from the day of invoice. And you're like it's ridiculous. It's like they expect you to just bankroll a building business because
I think even 30 days is daylight robbery, to be honest.
Totally.
Because especially with these big companies, you know, it's not your problem how big their job is. You need to be paid. And I would suggest trying to get weekly payment terms if you can. And if you can't do that, get fortnightly. But you should never be waiting a month.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I mean, I suppose there's negotiations that needs to happen there with it. But anyway, what I learned in those other podcasts is that you can negotiate, and you should. And so if there's something there that you do want removed, especially in the space of LDs and stuff like that, which is sometimes completely unrealistic. You know, you hear stories about painters getting slapped for LDs because but the gyprock walls weren't even put up, but because they hadn't done the painting, they get hit. You know, like it's just insane.
I have to say, out of all the tradies, I think painters have it pretty bad.
They're the last in, last out.
Well, yeah, and everybody mucks up their shit. Like people lean doors against their walls. They scuff the skirtings. They muck stuff up, putting cabinetry in. They like the things that I've seen now over the last, I don't know, 4 years with my painter, and he's worked on some really big building contracts, and it's just outrageous what they expect of him. And he's like, what, you want me to paint your shit for free? Like, I'm in business here too, man. So, yeah, very interesting.
Give him an inch, I take a mile.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Well, anyway, I hope that helps you guys in getting paid before Christmas. A bit of extra spending dough for you to blow on the kiddies. No doubt.
Yeah, no one wants to be broke at Christmas. Any more than they're going to be.
Exactly. I almost feel like it's a given these days, but anyway. Cool. Well, look, if any of you guys want to get hold of Kathi, where's the best place to do it? Over at the website?
Yeah, tradiebooks.au.
Tradiebooks.au, and you are a tradie bookkeeping
cost accounting. So we'll look after your bookkeeping, your compliance, and also make sure you make profit on every job.
Nice. Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I believe we're going to come back and have another conversation at some point in relation to the importance of the cash in the economy. Correct?
Yeah, I think there's some hidden dangers to losing cash, and I'd really like to talk to your audience about that, make them aware.
You did touch on it on our last episode, and since then, as I mentioned offline, I've been carrying around a $50 note, which I haven't broken because it's just so easy to beat my watch. But yeah, I'd be keen to have do that podcast because
let's do it.
I just feel like it's definitely trending towards that cashless sort of environment, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's some hidden dangers that we need to be aware of. It's very convenient being able to just beep at your phone at a terminal, but there are some hidden dangers that I do want to talk to your audience about. So I'm keen to do that soon. Cool.
All right. Well, thanks again for your time. And for your listeners and viewers out there, if you want to get hold of Kathi, I'll have some links within the show notes. So head across there, thesiteshed.com, and search Kathi with a K. Kathi, and then this episode will pop up along with all the other one that you've done. Cool. All right. That's a wrap.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Please, while you're here, subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Now, listen, if you are a trade-based business and you work in projects, roofing, bathrooms, kitchen renovations, home renovations, solar installations, that kind of thing, we would love to be able to showcase you as our next success case. Insane return on ad spend over here. We're talking 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 13,000% return on ad spend week in, week out with some of our clients. And we would love to put you in that picture. So please head across to tradie.wiki/YT for YouTube. Tradie.wiki/YT for YouTube. I look forward to chatting to you soon. Enjoy the next episode and thank you for all your support.